Please listen carefully. Welcome back to the Focus Target Podcast. This is your host, Captain Smiley. With me today, Van and Shy. And we are here to talk to you about life after death. Wait, no, that was last time. This time it's about life that never experiences death. Immortality. The idea that one could live forever. But before we get into immortality, we are going to have a question of the day because that's what we do here on the Focus Target Podcast. Oh, sorry
crap.
guys, I didn't give you guys an opportunity to say how you're doing. I usually give you a chance to say your piece. What's going on, fellas?
What's up, buddy?
Everybody feeling good today? All right, that was good. Good use of that time. All right. So before we get to our main discussion, we're going to get into a question of the day. Our question of the day is a little bit random, and it's just kind of something we've had in our possible questions of the day for a while. So we thought we'd get to it today. What location in the gaming universe would you like to visit for a vacation? That's my question for you. I'm going to start with Van, because I feel like Van goes on a lot of freaking vacations. So, bar's probably pretty high going to Hawaii and places like that, but where in the gaming universe is going to set the bar for you?
So this one was actually pretty easy to answer. Two of my favorite places, you mentioned one of them, Hawaii. And the other one was actually Vegas. And I just have a great time in Vegas. It just feels like you could be a kid again as an adult and you're kind of carefree and throw all the worries and woes to the wayside. And as such, the first place that came to mind was the Golden Saucer in the Coral Desert, Final Fantasy. But hopefully monsterless, so I don't die. These damn sandworms are dangerous.
Well, I think you could always, I don't think there were a lot of monsters. Well, that was only in the prison that had the worms, right? Like, if you make trouble at Gold Saucer and you get sent down to Corel Prison, then maybe you've got some trouble. But yeah, I think you could get there by the railway or the tramway without
but it just seems like a lot of fun. You have I think I may have talked on the podcast how I went to a horse racing event for the first time ever in my life, and it was way more fun than I ever thought it would be. Now, just imagine chocobo racing. Oh my gosh. It would be, okay. Well, I did. It was way more fun than I ever thought it would be. Anyway, imagine how chocobo racing would be. And gambling and all the other fun stuff that I like to do. So it all made sense.
That roller coaster where you shot ghosts and stuff, that seemed like
that
a
pretty
cool. Baller. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that. What about you, Shy? Where would you go on vacation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I think the problem is so many games are based around conflict and fighting that I think it's hard to picture goings to I think of some of my favorite gaming franchises like Halo. I wouldn't want to go to a Halo for a vacation and have the Covenant swarming me or whatever. I wouldn't want to
Well, let's say you could go in either in times of peace or equipped to handle threats. That's kind of how I'm going to take the question for my portion of it. So, yeah, assuming you can go to these places, either safely on your own or maybe you could go on a vacation with you could say something like the African savannah could be dangerous, but people still go on safari and they find ways to make it safe, even though there are dangers out there. So maybe you could have something like that where you have bodyguards or safe areas where you could go to some places that maybe aren't safe in the video games you've played.
Yeah.
I'll let you if you want. Would that be
maybe I'll chew on it? Maybe I'll chew on a little bit. Yeah.
All right, we'll come back to you then, Shai. For me, I would actually pick. Mine's kind of more of a broader, just a game in general, and that's Kingdoms of Amalur. One of the things I loved about that game is I feel like the locations are just so vibrant, and just there's a lot of one of my favorite things about playing that game is just going to a new area and just seeing what's there. And I just feel like there's so many cool forests and plateaus and mountains and just all kinds of crazy stuff. And to Shai's point, a lot of dangers as well. But I just feel like when I think of what games did I really feel kind of wowed by the geography, that's the one that came to my mind right away. Maybe an honorable mention to No Man's Sky. I think some of the planets in that game were really pretty cool. Also, to Shai's point, a little bit dangerous. Sometimes we have like acid storms and stuff rolling through. Not so cool, but some pretty cool sights to be seen there. All right, Shai, you got something for us?
Yeah, I've got something. I would, Valheim. and I think this actually, I never played Valheim. I think
What?
the Minecraft.
Good
Oh,
call.
Minecraft's a good call. That would have been a good call. But this is a game I think that Van will appreciate, and I think it's one that lends itself really well to vacation, especially like if you include the fauna, and that would be Horizon Zero Dawn. And I think like that is like such a beautiful
That's funny.
game,
I did
and I
think
think
about
it'd be so cool to like see like the robotic dinosaurs. And I think the cool thing about that game is a lot of times when you're running around in the game, a lot of times the enemies aren't even like super aggressive until you provoke them. Like they must have kind of their areas kind of, which probably makes it feel kind of artificial. But like on a vacation standpoint, like you could easily like just travel this world and really avoid conflict and just observe and like I don't know. I think that'd be a really cool place to go visit.
That would be amazing.
That's a good one. I like that Valheim call out. That Valheim was cool too. The Forest of Valheim. That's a game that probably deserves to be revisited. Maybe after a couple updates.
Yeah, they're doing some updates, right? So yeah,
that was a good one.
I remember how frustrating sailing was in that game, dude. The wind changes and everything. Oh my gosh.
took a whole party just to say you had one person sailing, one person like guiding and being like trying to fight the wind this way or the wind's turning, one person to be on the lookout for that giant sea serpent, be like, sea serpent.
One off the front, one off the back, looking for the sea serpent.
Right. Oh man, that was a good game. I like Valheim. All right, well, if you, our fair listeners, can think of a great place in a video game that you'd like to visit, drop us a line. FocusTargetPodcast@gmail.com is the best way to get a hold of us. Yeah, see how I changed that around because we're not really doing the full thing at the end now. Just the Gmail account. No need to tease you anymore. It's pretty easy, right? Like, just drop us a quick email. We'd love to hear from you. All right, let's talk about immortality. So last week we talked a little bit about reincarnation and kind of what it'd be like to live again as a separate person. But like, what about kind of a similar vein, right? But the idea of immortality is something that in myth and legend people have chased since the dawn of human history. Death is the final enemy who claims us all. And so people have always dreamed of, what if you could not have to die? What if you could live forever? So I'm going to start with kind of the less obvious question. It seems like a lot of people just assume, why would I die if I didn't have to? But let me ask you each, would you, if you had an opportunity, if, God came down to you today and was like, yo, you've been pretty cool on this earth. I'm going to give you an opportunity. You could be immortal. You could live forever. Would you take that offer, and why or why not? I'm going to start this time with Shy.
Can we explore this question a little bit more, or do I need to answer
absolutely.
it
No.
Because I think like
we're short podcast. We're done.
I think
yes or no.
It's yes or no, and then we're out of here. That's how it.
I mean, they're Stanley Cup playoffs tonight. I understand.
Got things to do tonight. Yeah, come on, let's go.
Yeah. So I think like when I was younger, it would have been for sure just like, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't I want to live forever? And I think even right now, like I could very definitively say I'm not ready to die right now. Like I don't feel ready to die. Like I want to live, and I have things I want to do or things I want to see, or I don't like. But we kind of touched on this. I think near the end. It was either near the end of the podcast last week, or maybe it was at post podcast. I remember like when we kind of started digging into some of this, which kind of led to us having this conversation. But like you do get a sense that as people get older, a lot of times they start getting to the state of mind where like they are ready to die. And I think there's been some like works of fiction, whether games I've played or movies I've watched throughout my life, that have kind of like illuminated some of that to me as well, like kind of like how that plays out. So like I think what I would ask God, I guess, if in this fictitious situation would be, is this like a one-time choice? Like if I'd say yes, does that mean that I could never go back and be like, all right, I'm ready to die now? Like, is it like, yes, you just have to live forever now, and you can't like at some point be like, I'm done.
Well, so would that change? Would that change your answer then? If you could choose to revoke your immortality at any time, you would say, yeah, I'd do it. But if it was a no, you're stuck this way once you make the choice, then you'd maybe think twice about it.
I don't think I'd want to live forever. Yeah.
Forever. Till the end of all the stars burn out and you're the last thing left in the darkness. The one in the darkness. I wonder why you wouldn't want that. Interesting. Yes. So
Man, what about you?
Immortality. Yes. All right. What about you, Van? Are you kind of in the same line, or do you feel differently?
No, I think Shy actually said it perfectly. That's exactly how I would feel too. Like, I wouldn't want to live indefinitely for infinity, but certainly, um, yeah, like if you can choose a time of your passing, I think that would be like the best of both worlds, and you can have your cake and eat it too.
Hmm.
But I don't know
Fair
if I'd
enough.
want to be immortal. Now, and then of course we can explore it, right? Do you mean immortal at 24 years old forever? Because like by the time you're 80, like life is just not
Fun.
pleasant, I hear. You know, you're not walking around
Yeah,
very much, you're not
I think
sprightly.
I think generally immortality entails like perfect health, perfect, you
Right.
know,
Like a
you know,
million, and like what happens to a human when
yeah,
they're a million? Like that
right.
would yeah.
Just a
So then yes,
walking
okay, young and
shambling
sprightly.
mound, like.
I haven't pooped in 50 years.
I can feel it coming though. Hopefully this decade. Yeah, yeah. No, I don't think any. I think for the purposes of this question, I think obviously that those kind of drawbacks would be a hard pass for most people. So yeah,
Yeah,
it'd be kind of like in mythology when you're turned into a vampire, right, or something. It's like your body's kind of like preserved now the way it is. You no longer age. You no longer take physical damage. You no longer,
I was wondering
have
how we
to.
were gonna fill an hour on this question, and I got like so many tangents I want to take it to
There we
already.
go. See,
Like
well, I don't know why you still wonder that. Like, it's like you're
we
supposed to
have
learn
two
from your
bullets here,
previous
two
experiences.
bullets, and that's supposed to
Yeah,
be an hour.
that's all we need. Yeah, that's all we really
Yeah,
need.
you're right.
Um,
Most of our
You're
things are like
breaking the
that.
fourth wall. You're
So
breaking the fourth wall.
would 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 those who I love and of my choosing be given the same option, or is this
See,
exclusive
I
to
think
me?
that.
ex-
Oh man.
that's usually the price you pay for immortality, right? Is
Hmm.
like you basically are accepting that if you live forever, then basically everybody you've ever known will precede you in death,
Yeah, you're
and
gonna get like
everybody you
74
ever will know.
marriages.
You
You're gonna have
know,
400 kids. I mean,
well, you're gonna be like,
granted, you
hey,
care to procreate and yeah, and
That's
marry.
an interesting question. Like generally, and again, I'm sorry, I talk sometimes. I think vampires are probably the most common immortal creature that we
Yeah,
encounter in common mythology, and
yeah,
I think generally, I think in most cases, most immortal, other than maybe like Greek gods who are very much about spreading the seed of Zeus and others, but like generally, I think in whether or not you're able to have children, I think is an interesting question with immortality, right?
Yeah.
Like, are you are you able to then like hang out with your lines of ancestors, like
man,
through
that'd
the
be
ages? It's
gnarly.
like this is my great 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 grandson who, now like I had 500 years ago, I met his, the original. Well,
Wild.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it kind of adds a different bit of flavor to it, but I do think you generally assume that you're the only one who's immortal, and so you kind of have to. Oh, look!
Hi, baby. Say hi.
Of
What are you
progeny,
asking? Let's go in the store. Yes. Later. I don't know what she asked.
Like a phantom, she appeared out of
yeah, you just
the
said
focus
yes.
target logo.
Wait a minute, you don't know what she said, and you just said yes. That
Look at her
seems like
face. Did you see how cute she
that
was?
seems like you might catch some hell for that one later.
I think she
Which,
said, "Can I go buy new shoes?" Which we've been promising her for a few days.
okay.
So yeah, we'll do that.
So when your wife finds her alone down at the Payless in a couple hours, she's gonna be like, "Why are you here? Daddy said I
yeah.
could."
Nope. Here's the other one. Speaking of children, yes. Okay, come back in a few minutes. I'm busy. Can you close the door, please? Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Well,
Usually, wifey
that's all
picks them
right.
up and takes them next door, but this time she
It's all
decided to
good.
come back home.
All
Um.
good.
So yeah. Okay. So then the same offer is not extended to you or to your family or friends of your choosing or anything like that.
Right. Because I think
Yeah, that's pretty gnarly.
that would make it a lot easier, right? Then it's not really that hard of a question for the most
Yeah.
part. If
Yeah.
you're able to give it up whenever you want and you're able to make
Yeah.
anybody you care about stick with you, it's like, okay, like
Yeah.
You
Right.
can
well,
have
it
your
would
cake
be
and eat it too.
what's the cost here? There's always
Yeah.
got to be
What's
a
the
cost.
downside, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
All
I
right.
mean, those
Well,
are the downsides that you talk about. Is like, does historically, again, talking about, when you see this kind of thing in literature, it makes it harder. If you're immortal, you tend to then, the question is is it worth being immortal when then you kind of lose the things that make life worth living, right? Like you
Yeah.
lose, like every attachment you make becomes harder because you know you're going to have to watch this person get old and die. You're not on an equal playing field with them. You can't have a relationship among of equals, either as a friendship or a romantic relationship, because you're not the same. You're not really even a human anymore. You're something different, something more. Um, and so, there's also the idea that part of what, everything is about the kind of the ephemeral nature of our life, right? Like the highs and the lows are what give each other meaning, right? The
Right.
old saying that you wouldn't appreciate a sunny day if it never rained or was never cloudy, right? You don't appreciate the good times if there's no bad times. Like how
Yeah.
much of life do we appreciate for what it is because it is fleeting, because we know we only have so much time? Like, would you just get bored with, especially after a couple thousand years potentially of doing everything there is to do, and it's like what, probably
That
a
was going to be
question
my
nobody
point
can answer.
too. To
Mhm.
one
Go
of the
ahead.
reasons why I wouldn't want to be immortal forever is because like I the eagerness to get things done and to develop skills and all that stuff is because you know you're not immortal, because you have a very limited time, right? So let's spend it as often as we can with our family, friends, doing things that we enjoy and all that stuff. Now, if you knew that you were immortal and you didn't have your days numbered, like I think I would just procrastinate every single day and not do like anything because I'm like
There's definitely
I
a
literally
danger
have
of
I have
apathy,
no reason to
right?
do anything. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Like, I think in the
Where's your
beginning it'd be kind of
motivation?
cool because you're like, okay, well, let me take up a new career. Let me take up a new skill that would be extremely difficult. That like, let me become a doctor now, even though I'm 40. Not 40-year-olds go back. I'm not 40 yet. I'm 39. But not many 39-year-olds become doctors now. But I could become a doctor if I were immortal. I can
Anything you
re-become
want, yeah.
anything at that point. So that would be exciting, I think, in the beginning. And then after that, I think you'd be like, damn, it sucks. Did everything.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, oh, go ahead, Shai.
Well, just think about like seeing stuff, right? Like we just talked about vacations, and like so many people have like a bucket list, right? Like I want to go to Mount Everest, but it's not their bucket list isn't I want to see every single site on the planet Earth, right? Because
Yeah.
that's impossible for few except maybe the elite, the elite wealthy and stuff like that. But like imagine living for 500,000 years and you've been everywhere on Earth. You've been down into the Great Barrier Reef, and you've been to the tallest mountain, and it's like then I think that's actually like you talk about like the fear of procrastinating or getting lazy. I feel like that's if that's not the starting point, that's almost the ending point, right? Like after you've done
Yeah.
everything, after it's like, why do I even get out of bed in the morning? Like what is there to do? I've done everything. Like
What's the urgency? Yeah.
I think for me, because I don't think I ever answered the original question. We got a little bit tangential. For me, I don't think immortality offers that much of an appeal to me. I agree. It's maybe I don't know if you guys. This doesn't quite apply to you, Shai, but maybe it did when you were younger and like lived still with with like your parents at home. But like Van, I don't know how you feel sometimes when you're, you and I both have a family. We have kids running around all the time. Like for me, like sometimes when everybody's out of the house and it's just me and I'm kind of alone, like when my wife kind of takes the dogs and kids and goes somewhere. It's kind of fun to have the house to yourself, and it's like, oh wow, I can do whatever I want. I got all this time, but then like even with all the things I have to do after, usually not too long, it's kind of like, man, it's kind of like the fun wears off pretty fast, and
Yeah.
you're kind of like, I kind of, want my family to come back now. Kind of the Home Alone syndrome, right? Where like,
Yeah.
he as soon as his family's gone, he's partying and everything, but then like he's like, oh, kind of wish they'd come back now. I think you kind of would run into that, like you said, like it'd be really fun to be immortal for even for the first, couple, millennia perhaps. I think you could find a lot to fill your time, and I think you could do a lot of cool stuff that you and I, none of us will ever be able to do because we don't have the time, as you said, whether it's to master skills, to go places, or even just to like have an influence on human
Yeah.
history. What if you said, hey, you know what, over the next 1,000 years, I want to like help shape this planet. I want to turn all these crazy people into Like, I want to turn this place into a golden age. Like, I want to shape humanity to a certain direction, and like see if you could do that. Like, you've got the time and potentially the power to be like, what can I do to? You could do all kinds of crazy stuff, but eventually, I think you would run into that wall where it's like, what's now? But so to me, I don't find that terribly appealing. In fact, as I think I mentioned last time, I'm a little bit more interested in the opposite. Like, I'm curious what happens after death, and like I think to be not to get to find that out is actually a lot to give up. But on the other hand, I do think that I wonder, like, if you were given an opportunity like that, like, one of the things that I've always wanted was like to just know all the secrets of the universe, right? Like, what's the true nature of reality? What's the true nature of the universe? How did things really happen? What is going to happen in the future? And I think if you were immortal, you might have the ability to get some of those answers that probably again none of us will ever get. And so it's like, do you have, like, is that an opportunity that you could pass up? An opportunity to really find out something, that to do things that nobody has ever done, to know things nobody else has ever known. It would be a hard choice for me if I, especially to your point, Shai, if the offer was not so generous and it was, listen, if you take this, that's it. Like, now you're God, and like, and it kind of, to take us on a different tangent. You know what if there, like, I mean, isn't that basically the definition of God? Isn't that like some people's idea of God is like, if you were an immortal person and maybe you could find a way to create life, to set into, what if God's just a dude who's immortal and got bored and was like, I'm gonna see if I can get life to grow on this planet and just kind of see how it goes. Like, see what grows on this, thing, like kind of like planting, like we plant a garden and see what grows, like
Yeah.
there's almost that idea that, like, could God just be somebody who has an infinite amount of time and power and is just kind of like seeing what happens, kind of the divine watchmaker theory. um but
I have
maybe
a
that's going a different place.
follow-up question for Shy. Um, isn't isn't it told in the Bible, and correct me if I'm wrong, that after the second coming of Christ, that he will resurrect everybody into new bodies and they'll live in heaven forever?
So
right? So isn't that a form of immortality?
So yeah, it is. And as I didn't want to clarify more, I guess, in my initial answer. I wanted to keep it simple. But like, yeah, I do believe that like there is a form of eternal life or immortality, but like it's not in this current. So I don't know. Like, we don't need to turn this into a theology of like Judeo-Christian, like, of the Bible kind of podcast. But like, and even how you described it, like that's very much like a traditional fundamental interpretation of what that means. Like this idea that like, this world will pass away, whatever, and that there's this kind of like, other plane we don't know of, that there's streets of gold. I mean, there's a much more modern theological movement where a lot of the interpretations of like that is that God will come and actually restore the planet Earth, and that he will bring it into a restored like form and reign on Earth, and people will like will be given new bodies but live eternally on Earth, basically.
So like bring back Eden, I guess.
Yeah, but like
isn't that what originally
Eden
was?
Basically, yeah. And so like that's, I mean, yeah, I think I just didn't want to like assume that we were talking about that. I assumed we were talking about like being given immortality in the current broken world that like we live in, that we see, where there's conflict, there's disease, there's suffering. Like, we're not talking about some other thing where that's all been removed and you live forever. It's you live amid amongst that, which is kind of why I gave that stipulation, because I think like that, even if like Smiley said, even if like part of that was you won't get sick, you won't get hurt, you can't die, all this stuff, like there's an emotional toll that is taken as you live, and living forever would just multiply or make that exponential potentially. And like it was interesting for me hearing you guys' thoughts on just family and stuff, because that's honestly one of the first that would be a big thing for me. Like if I was happily married with kids, I think especially if you if you were happily married, I think like you would have you had a life partner and you guys were close, and like, I mean, I think that would be very hard. Like, I think that a lot of times you see older couples who've been married, 40, 50 years. When one passes away and they're both old, you almost, sometimes like, it almost feels like the other one just kind of like gives up, like to a certain extent. It's almost like they're ready to go now because their husband or wife has passed along. and so I think that I can't imagine how hard that would be to like watch like your spouse. And like honestly, I think like I don't know, like now I'm ranting. I'll cut off here, but like I think even harder than that would probably be like living long enough to like watch. Let's say you're 200 years old and like now your kids, your grandkids are passing along, and like I think that's once again like I just I think of movies and books, and like I think you can get like some really powerful images from fiction, and like I mean I don't know, like was it
Interstellar
I think
did that pretty well.
Well, I think Interstellar did it well. I think, oddly enough, I'm thinking of actually the Two Towers, and like, doesn't the King of Rohan like bury one of his children or something, or like, and just like that idea that like, when you see men, especially men who have children who are soldiers or whatever, and have to like put their children to rest, and like just that seems to be such a blow. I can't relate to it, but
that's interesting because it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like the other side of that coin is, don't you have, in a way, if you're given an option like that, do you not have a responsibility to your family to take something like that? It's like, yeah, it's hard on you. You're going to have to go through outliving them, but it also means that you're going to be there for them, that you're going to be there to take care of your family. Like, I mean, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow and then my son grows up without a father and my wife is a widow, right? If I take immortality, I know that I'm there to protect them. I'm there to help them. As long as they live, as long as my kids live, they'll always have a dad who's there to look out for them and be there for them. And like, that's something that I wish I could guarantee them today, but like it's a dangerous world right now. I feel like, especially in a lot of places in the world, you take for granted that you're here and that you're here to help your family. Like it almost to me would feel like if I have an opportunity to do that, and to the larger scale, even like maybe once my family's passed on, like if I can live forever, I'm uniquely positioned to try to make the world a better place. Like to your point, all the suffering on earth, all the things that are going wrong, like somebody who lives forever probably could exert some influence on that over time. And like, do you not have a responsibility to try to do right by the planet and by your people? I don't know. I'm not saying necessarily yes, but it's certainly something I feel like I would have to consider. And I don't think it would be an easy choice either way, regardless of what the stipulations are. I think that kind of offer would be something that probably, no matter what you picked, you would regret it to a certain degree. My feeling is that no matter how you went with it, you would kind of always be like, God damn it, I either should have or I shouldn't have. But whatever I picked was kind of like,
yeah. You say no, and then a year later you find out you have cancer, and you're like, why didn't I just say yes? Or like, like
exactly.
You say yes, and then and then 100, 200 years later, you're like, this sucks. Like I don't
want
to be alive anymore. Yeah.
Humanity, World War III happened, and I'm the only one left. Guess I'll play with some
nuclear fallout around the world, and I can't. And I can't die.
Guess I'll try to go into space and see if I can find other planets. Yeah, I mean it's a difficult call for sure. We talked a lot already about examples of immortalities in games and media. Was there any other specific ones that you guys wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I mean, there's one that I'm the one that put that bullet point in there because there's a game that like I don't know, like honestly, I think my view on immortality changed when I played a specific game actually, and it was oddly enough, it was an RPG on Xbox 360, which sounds kind of like an oxymoron, but it was one of the first big ones. It was one called Lost Odyssey. It was one of the original Final Fantasy guys had like made his own studio and brought this game. And it was a really good game. It was, for being one of the first big RPGs on the console, it was really good. But the whole point of the game was the main character was an immortal warrior. He was immortal, and like I think up until that point, like I'd had that view of like immortality be awesome. That's that's badass, whatever. And like the point of the game deals with like just his deep pain. Like it's an action it's a game. It's enjoyable to play or whatever, but like the story is very mature and very just I'm trying to think of the best. It was very
thought provoking.
Thought provoking is a good term. I'm trying to think more like not dismal. I'm just trying to think of like sobering, maybe
melancholy.
Sobering. It's melancholy, yeah. Because like one part of the game, he runs into like he meets these people. He's like helping them, whatever, and it turns out that it's his granddaughter, and she's on her deathbed from old age, and her children, his great grandchildren, he like takes in and they kind of like join your party as you go on. But like, you know, like, and you can just see like there's a scene, he's like at her deathbed as she's dying, and like, you know, this, you know, having to like watch your great granddaughter die, like, and I, like, cause, and you can't die. And I think like it really made me think a lot about just that idea that like how much pain could you take on over the years before like, and we didn't even get into this, but like before maybe you'd even go insane. Like, is that even a danger you'd consider like at the beginning, right? Like, how long could you keep your sanity, you know, from you know, spending hundreds or thousands of years dealing with,
I feel like partially, and that's a totally fair point. I always kind of assume that just like your physical health is maintained regardless, just like your body doesn't break down, so too is your mind able to handle the rigors. Not that it'd be easier, but that you would like at least be able to keep your cognitive abilities.
Like your
But like,
chemical balance would be fine,
yeah,
and you'd be able
like
to.
yeah, like now whether like to your point, like the suffering that you endure and like the isolation, I feel like the loneliness of being a unique entity like that. I think that would certainly be something that would be difficult to grapple with. You'd really have to come to terms with it.
like narcissism, how likely would it be to fall into like a narcissistic mindset since you
Yeah.
are forever, you know, like other things are
Right.
temporary, but you are, I mean, you know, like it's just fraught with peril. But yeah, that's the game that I always think of. And I just like,
Well, the other side of it too is like what are the chances that it kind of makes you incredibly jaded and cynical about the
Yeah.
nature of the world and the nature of people, and perhaps seeing that, you know, maybe an inability to perhaps change things for better, or seeing like evil cycles repeat and repeat. Maybe do you turn yourself into a more of a dark god, or a supervillain in a a way?
and if you can't be killed, like what if you destroyed the world? Like,
Yeah, what
because
if you decide,
yeah.
humanity is a cancer that needs to be expunged? Yeah, that's another danger of such things.
I think I'm a little more narrow focused and less
Mhm.
cynical than you all. I think I would learn to code, join Valve, and then develop Half-Life 3 myself.
Oh man,
I
and like
pitched everybody.
So I mean, that'll take you, a couple 100 years probably, but like, what then? What do you do once that magnum opus is complete?
Half-Life 4.
God, could you imagine? If you were immortal, you'd actually be able to play Star Citizen.
So, well, jury's still
That
out
might
on
still be pushing. Yeah.
All right, well, that's a great. I mean, maybe that is your answer, but one. I kind of talked a little bit about like kind of some of the things I feel like I would do if I was immortal. Shy, and Van, you can expand on yours if that was more of a joke answer. But like, what are some things that you guys, let's say you take the immortality option. You're like, all right, I'm gonna do it. Whatever the stipulations are, whatever you decide to do it. Like, what do you do now? What are your priorities as an immortal? Like, what do you want to do with your infinite life? Um, like for me, like I said, I would definitely want to take care of my family, and it'd be pretty easy, I think, over time to amass wealth. And being in a unique position where you can't be killed, there's a lot of probably high risk, high reward things that you could take on a little more safely than others to set yourself up. So, you kind of could do stuff like that. But like, what are you guys taking on as an immortal? What are you doing to keep yourself sane or keep yourself occupied? Um, it sound like what I heard from you already a little bit was Van wants to like learn everything there is to know, and Shy wants to see everything there is to see, potentially. But what else? What's that? That only takes a couple 100 years probably. So you got a lot of time to fill. Shy, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think I would definitely stick around until like whether or not I mean, if this was like tomorrow, and let's assume that some of the stipulations you have kind of talked about traditionally, like let's say that because I become immortal, I can't have kids all of a sudden, and I don't have kids, so like I don't have kids, ever, like that's now it's no longer an option. I would probably stick around Earth probably as long as like my parents were around and like my nephews and just like my immediate family, and maybe if I met someone and got married, like stick around while she was alive. But I think one of the coolest things, and just talking about, I mean, just thinking about the possibilities of immortality, I think one of the coolest possibilities is space travel.
Yeah.
Like that is one of the
Mhm.
things that the average human
Yep.
can't do because of just the vastness of space. And you could, I mean, if you're not going to die, you could travel thousands of light years and just see the galaxy and maybe even see the universe. And like, I talk about insanity, like you'd have to be really comfortable with yourself and like quiet and being alone. I don't know, maybe
Or
that'd be hard, but
or
like,
you know, I think you have to really have a good imagination and a good
hmm,
ability to occupy yourself.
yeah.
I think I would be very well suited to. I'm very good at occupying myself for long periods of time. Always have been. What about you, Van? Space travel? See the
Yeah, I
universe?
think similar. I think I'd like to see
Of course.
where I think I'd like to see where humanity goes. Do we save ourselves or do we just completely implode? Like, do
Mm.
we completely ruin the Earth? Like, can I try to fix whatever is? You know, do we blow each other up through nuclear winter? If that's the case, like, is there a way for me to rebuild humanity afterwards? I don't know. Just anything. I also think, so not only like nuclear fallout, but also where does AI go in the future? And then, you know, do we eventually? I I genuinely believe that at some point in the future, and I know this is cliche all the way back from the 50s and 60s. I genuinely think that sometime in the future, like AI is going to overrule humanity and humans. Like we will not be able to keep it in check once it starts to learn on itself. You know, they had
D-
like,
Sorry to take this on a tangent, but did you see that story that's been circulating the last couple of days? That
yes,
like someone got fired from Google. Was it
Google
Google?
for thinking that, yeah, for thinking one of the programs he wrote became sentient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we
And
may
I
be
told,
closer than you think, my
dude, I
friend.
can't remember who I told this, but they played him off and they were like, "Oh, this guy's crazy. You know, we don't agree with him." And I'm like, "You need to have the opposite approach with this. Like if somebody says my shit's sentient, like you
Gotta
need to
find
say,
out.
"Okay, why? Let's look at this together.
Yeah.
Let's work together. Let's study this a long time and figure it out." But they like dismissed him right away and I'm like, "That's so dangerous." Especially because like what if it were sentient, right? Now he's a coder. He developed it. He can just go and code and develop it somewhere else. So that's like that's a whole other crazy thing. But I
Well,
sincerely think that AI will it's just going to be smarter and better and more intuitive and everything. Just think of like social media, right? The AI and social media and of addictive programming that it has with your brain and how some people are literally addicted to their phone, like between the dopamine hits and the chemical imbalances in their brains and all that stuff, like it's showing them exactly what they want to see in order to keep them staring at their screens. That's AI programmed. Now that's like at its most fundamental level. Once it starts to learn humans and human interactions and desires and what we want, and it's able to be more than just pictures on a screen, I don't know, man. We stand no chance against AI as
I've
humans.
I've said it's been my position. I think on this. I hope on this podcast. I hope it's documented somewhere in the annals. But I've always been of the opinion that people always like to talk about the zombie apocalypse, but like the robot apocalypse is real and it's going to happen. Maybe
Yeah,
if we last long enough, I'm 100% with you on that. Like it's
yeah.
only a
So
matter of time
I'd like to see
before
how
the
we
big
handle that, and then
there's a
if we're
war.
able to break that cycle and get out of that and continue with humanity, because that's coming.
I think that's a really perfect point. I completely agree. And I think to go back to one of our earlier questions about media or games or things that this wasn't necessarily, immortality was a little bit at play, but one of the games that really influenced me about this in that same vein was actually Chrono Trigger. And one of the
Mm,
coolest things I thought about Chrono Trigger, which is more about time travel and going back and forth in time, was like how very um, deliberately they showed like just the changing of the society, the changing of the landscape over from all the way back in the prehistoric area all the way up through the post-apocalyptic future. And I always thought that was such a cool idea to like be able to watch like the development, like the history in the future and see the kind of how things worked out. And I definitely agree with that. I think it'd be super fascinating to just be able to find out like is humanity truly on the what it feels like right now to me is like a certain road to ruin from one of many different things. It feels like there's like 1,000 different things racing to see which is going to wipe out humans first.
yeah.
Um, versus like, like my wife Sarah, who I like to name drop on the podcast from time to time. She's always been of the belief that humans have faced challenges in the past, things have looked dark in the past, but there's a lot of smart people, there's a lot of creativity, and like when things get really bad, people will find a way to they'll turn their attention from the stupid stuff and put it towards like, how do we solve this problem that's about to kill us, and that will kind of overcome. And like I'd be super curious to know, like you said, which way do we go with that? How does it really end? And like to be able to have knowledge beyond your own lifetime would be a real treat, for sure.
Who was the doctor from Jurassic Park that said life finds a way?
Finds a way. That would be Jeff Goldblum.
Dr. Goldblum.
Yeah, but what was his character's name? I guess he wasn't was he a doctor? Yeah, he was. He was a doctor on chaotic. Yeah,
chaos
theory, on chaos theory and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, no, I don't know. I think I would agree with her that once the writing was on the wall and we saw the red flags and all that stuff, like humans are smart enough to stop it. Once we got past a point of no return, I know it sounds redundant, there's nothing we'd be able to do at that point. Like the proliferation of intelligence amongst machines would just.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the robot,
fast.
the robot, yeah. Well, that's I mean, I don't know if you've seen Avengers 2, but I know Shy has. And like, how long did it take Ultron? He spends 5 seconds on the internet, and he's like, "Oh, humanity's got to go."
Yeah,
and like that's super relatable, I think, right? Like you'd feel like that's how, if you just think about it logically, like why would a machine not come to that conclusion? It's completely believable.
Yeah, I'm gonna completely butcher this story, but wasn't there was like that what was it? The first chess programmed game to ever beat the Grandmaster, like up until a certain point when like the people at MIT developed like the software to finally beat like the Grandmasters of chess, and they just could not beat the program in chess. And then more recently there was another MIT, or may have been even at one of the companies, Google or something like that. They developed an AI to learn chess, and they played it against that software. And within 4 hours, it had played like thousands and thousands and thousands of games, and it just whipped it every single time after that. It learned first of all, it learned the game, and then on top of it, it learned how to beat this thing that was like the reigningest champ for many, many years, even beyond Grandmasters. But then once you tailored AI to it, self-learning, it just whooped it out of the water within hours. And it's like, it's crazy.
And then wasn't there didn't they have like a computer on Jeopardy at one point too, to like beat everybody in Jeopardy? Like I don't remember. I feel like it was a while ago, but it was like,
all right, guys, this isn't an AI podcast.
Yeah, we've definitely gone down the AI.
I mean, because final thought about AI, because like I don't know that I fall on the side of Sarah here, but like I do think like what is like, this is like a theme of a number of movies out there. You think of the Terminator series or whatever, like, humans against robots, human against AI. Like, how can humans beat that? And I mean, I don't know, maybe it's human wishful thinking, because, when humans make the films, they always do. But like something that humanity has that an AI probably will never have is like the idea of like almost like intuition or spontaneity, or even like risk taking, stuff like that, right? Like that's something like a machine doesn't necessarily, I don't know, compute, right? Like, I mean, they are going to always do the most logical thing. I don't know. I mean, so
that's a whole nother podcast. I think
I think so.
Is the human mind discernible from a computer program at the at the most advanced levels? But it's a little bit different. But I want to take us in a somewhat similar direction, and this is one of the bullet points that has been added to our podcast. I think it's a little bit relevant here, is will we ever reach a point where immortality is possible? And I think the most likely place to find that would be the idea of storing some aspect of your mind in a computer system. We see that a lot in in fantasy and sci-fi. People whose mind gets transferred, it downloaded into the computer banks, and there's still a semblance of life there. Like, what do you guys think about that? Do you think, and whether it's that sort of immortality or another, I think different, I would say, for Shai, to one of your earlier points, different from like a second coming type of immortality, but more of an immortality in this body, right? An immortality of you, who you are today.
Yeah.
Like, do you think through whether it's through science or technology or something else, do you think it's possible that before we die, or maybe not even in our lifetime, but let's say in the lifetime of humanity, like before humanity runs its course, is there a chance that we might find a way to conquer death as a species? I guess also maybe possibly through like advanced medicine, like body rebuilding, like maybe you kind of have that. Was it like the ship of somebody or other? That idea that like
Yeah,
if you
the
replace
Greek, yeah.
every cell in your body, are you the same person? Like things like that. What do you guys think? Is it possible? I'm gonna start with Shy this time. Do you think we'll ever be immortal?
I mean, and what was the stipulation that maybe by the end of our lives, or just like you're
I'd
saying, just
say
in the
by the
history of?
just either one. Maybe and you could answer for both,
I
whether you
just,
think it
I
happened
just,
in our lifetime or
I
just before the end of time.
Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, it seems far fetched to me, and you just don't know how far human ingenuity can go. Like, it's hard the time we live in and seeing the time that our parents or our grandparents were growing up in, and just how different things are. Like, even I don't know if you guys ever just stop and like, I just stopped the other day, and I forget what I was doing. I was like doing something on my phone or something, and I was like, like 20 years ago, like how different was my life just from a technology standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Like just in 20 years. And I was thinking of like, I think just like like the whole phrase, kids these days or whatever, but like just like how they've grown up and like at young ages with just stuff that I would have taken for granted, like as being possible as a kid. And that's just my, and things seem like they're accelerating, so it's just, I don't feel like we'll get to a place where like the whole like storing yourself in a data bank, in my mind, like I think, I don't know if I would even say religiously, but I just don't think that's how how we work. I don't know that I could be stored in a data bank. I think there is something deeper, whether it's my soul and my mind combined, or like there's more here than could go onto a server and it still be me, in my opinion. As far as like, so I think the best bet would be like a physical immortality. And I mean, it is hard to think with how our bodies decay and the idea of entropy and the second law of thermodynamics, that like we would ever get to a point where like we could stop that completely in our physical selves. And like you said, let's say you didn't stop it, you just kept replacing it. Like at what point are you, right? Like, I mean, I guess if you were able to maintain that soul, mind, whatever, your consciousness.
It seems like what you just said is that like there's something more to you than just your body or your mind. So like it seems like one or the other would have to be possible. Like I do agree with you. I think if you tried to like if someone tried to transfer my mind to a computer, I think maybe my mind would, like, maybe to a third party it might be indistinguishable, but I don't think it would have my consciousness. I think that's uh, I don't know. How do you transfer your consciousness? Like you can transfer my memories, you can transfer my mannerisms, but how do you transfer? Like how do you know that it's the me that's me now, the same one in the computer, right? Like, and what happens to the me that's me now? Um, but like if that can't be taken away, like I mean, like if you chopped off your hand and then found a way to regrow it, that doesn't change that you're you. And like, so why would that be different from like your whole body? I guess I feel like the best bet for it is actually like medical advancement. The idea of like, could you regenerate your body? Like the reason we die is like you said, our bodies just decay. Like if we could find a way to replenish whatever is breaking down and restore it, I think maybe you would have a chance there. I don't think that would happen in our lifetime, but I feel like one day, like I feel like theoretically that doesn't sound like an impossibility to me. Um, the way maybe like transferring your soul into a computer, I don't know how you would ever get like that. Seems like a lot more of something that we've having to think of something we've never thought of before. What about you, Van? What do you think about? I think you're probably the one who put this on here. So what do you got?
Yeah, I think I think it would be absolutely ironic how if we were all in a simulation, how our overlord would be just cracking up right now at the thought that you can't imagine a soul being in a computer. Because we would
What
all
if we're
technically be in a
already in a
computer already. Yeah,
computer?
exactly. So I
Yeah,
was cracking up at that a
that's
little
funny.
bit. But no, I think you're spot on. And just to because we haven't
Overlord,
talked enough
our
about
overlord.
about about AI. Let's bring AI back. I think AI actually, ironically, will be the death of humanity, but will also be the gift of immortality. I think through advancements in computer and computer processing and self learning, like you said, Shai, that technology is just growing and advancing at an exponential rate, and we all see that from what a TV was now to what a TV is, or was back then 20 years ago, to what a TV is now, from the computing power in your phone versus what the computing power was in a TI-86 calculator the same size, 30 years ago or 20 years ago. It's insane. And I think it's only going to continue to accelerate exponentially to the point where, with the advent of AI and self-learning and all that stuff, that's going to come up with a quick answer on, hey, by the way, this has been under your nose this entire time and you guys didn't even know about it. This is how you do it. I think there's an answer out there for via medicine for that immortality, whether it's replacing proteins or whatever, microscopic robots at an atom level or something like that. Like there's a way there, and I think it would come, if I have to guess, I think it would happen either at the very late stages of our lifetime. If not, I would theorize in my child's life that will happen.
I mean, what if it's CRISPR? What if CRISPR's the answer? What if it is just, and so maybe it's not an idea of that any living human could just become immortal. What if it's that future, eventually we have generate the first generation is born that will be immortal because we edited out any gene of entropy or whatever, like disease, like you make a perfect human being, like
right. Yeah, I think we could get there medically, and I don't think we're that far away from it either.
You need back to tanks.
Yeah, just think back to tanks.
I mean, I think that type of immortality, a like race level immortality, really, then that's kind of where you move into like intergalactic civilization, right? Because then if nobody's dying, now you don't have a choice. You're not able to, the one planet can't sustain an immortal population, so you have to constantly expand along with the universe. So a lot of interesting other challenges that would bring up. But
I mean, you're assuming that these people would give birth to children, right? I mean, I don't know, like
it's true. Yeah,
birth rate is declining in like Western civilization, and if that continued along with scientific progress, like what if you had a generation come into effect that was immortal and they didn't have children? Like, I mean, like I don't know, like
even if only half of them had
humans,
children,
the last
like that would be, yeah, exactly, that'd be crazy.
Interesting. Yeah, see, I feel like there's a lot of rabbit holes we could go down here if we wanted to. But we do have a couple minutes left. Do you guys have any other thoughts? Anything else you wanted to get into? Any other topics you want to discuss regarding immortality or AI, or
I'm curious,
circling back to reincarnation?
I mentioned a game that it really struck me. Like, you guys have never, like, there's been no like movies or books or video games that have like
the first
immortality that you guys like really struck you as like a poignant story or made you think about it in a different way.
It's not super poignant, but it's relevant. Death Note, right? It's an anime, and Ryuk is a god, and there's the Shinigami realm, which is the god realm, when they're all immortal, and they're freaking miserable, which is the whole point of the story. Why Ryuk dropped the Death Note to Earth was because he was just bored and wanted to see what a human did with all this power to kill at will. But when you go to the Shinigami realm, the world, they're like, God, it's been so long. Like, all we do is, gamble every single day. This is so boring. We've been alive for eternity and all that stuff. So even in their world, it's not unlike what we possibly described what it could be in the future, to live forever, what it feels like.
Trying to think other. I mean, I already mentioned Chrono Trigger. I'm trying to think. Like, I'm sure that I have, read something or watched something that made me consider it. But like, I guess maybe the closest thing I can think of is a movie that we reference on this podcast fairly frequently, which is
Office Space.
No, that one doesn't really deal that much with immortality. You know, but
ID4.
if you were
The Interview.
go that direction. No, stop saying anything. Inception. Like the idea in Inception that like because of the way time slowed down multiplicatively. Like if you went deep enough into a dream and a dream and a dream and a dream and a dream, you're essentially living forever. You can live a lifetime in this dream and wake up and you're really just not even back to your original self. You're still just in a different dream to live another lifetime. And like time is passing so slow in the real world that you're essentially immortal in a way. And in kind of a cool way, in a way that maybe that you have some control over. And again, very similar themes like godhood, like creating the worlds around you, having basically the power to live whatever life you want, live in whatever environment you want without consequences, without fear of death. So I guess that's probably a movie that would come to mind.
And one of the interesting things about that movie is, right, Leonardo DiCaprio's character leaves, right? I mean, spoiler alert, I guess. The movie's been out forever, right? But like, it was wasn't him and his wife like were the ones who'd gone down, and
who were like, hey, like we need to
he's
wake
like,
up.
this is a fantasy, like this is not life, and he left, and then and so like, you know, he rejected that idea of immortality, or like a fake, you know, fake, you know, I don't know, which doesn't maybe tie into like immortality in the real world, which wouldn't be this kind of fake fantasy maybe, but like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's still relevant.
It's a good pull. That's a good pull.
Did love that movie. That was a good one.
What if you could become the best hockey player of all time because you could?
Well, you could. Well, you could.
The rest of your whole life just to get
See, you practice every day without aging or getting sore for 20 years. Like no one would be able to touch you.
See, again, you guys think you immortals, you new immortals, you think so small, such small scale. You know what I thought about was keeping yourself occupied, right? One of the things I do, I'm going to tell myself a little bit here, is I have these maybe you guys have seen them, maybe you haven't. I have these like card football games that I've played since I was a kid. Like I have leagues that I play where they're like index cards where like there's like they're all the players and positions, and like there's a whole game, right? Like I have years of statistical history from these imaginary football leagues that I've been playing since I was a kid, right? So like if I was immortal, like probably like why I could have a league forever, but why would I even need a paper league? Like what if I helped create life on a planet and help guide them to love sports, and like the NFL could be my league, right? Like maybe God made humanity so that he could watch hockey because he wanted to see the NHL over the course of 1,000 years, or you know, like what's to stop you from that, right? Like that's where I go with it. Whereas like you would have the power to, like in time, like anything is possible. If you have an infinite amount of time, anything is possible.
Yeah.
You just gotta dream very big. So yeah, sorry, that probably got weird. That went down a strange rabbit hole. But talk about some weird stuff here. So all right, I think we're about to wrap it up here. I think we're close to time here. Any final thoughts, gentlemen? I know I kind of already asked that, but
will this podcast live in immortality?
Will this podcast live forever? That's a great question. Will millions of years from now people watch this podcast and be like, wow, those dudes were so right about so many things. They had no idea. They had no idea how close
at all.
Well, maybe the machines will review our podcast.
That makes sense. You're like, oh, those two guys, they knew we were going to kill everybody. They tried to warn everyone.
The prophets, Van and Smiley, who knew of their impending doom.
Here we go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we didn't talk about that, but like, I meant to get to. God dang! I always, when you were talking about before, like, aren't computers in a way immortal, right? Like if you had an AI that became sentient, like, would it not be immortal? I mean, I guess maybe only by our standards, because things like metal and computer components decay so much slower than us. But another interesting question. I feel like maybe there's an AI podcast in the future.
That you could literally take the essence and just transfer it onto a fresher hard drive.
Right.
Whereas
All right. Well, if you guys and gals, being our listeners, have any thoughts on immortality, whether you would take immortality, what stipulations you would put on it in order to be seduced by the lure of it, or if you just want to tell us why we're right or wrong about the impending robot apocalypse, The best way to reach the Focus Target Podcast is via email, focustargetpodcast@gmail.com. We can be found all over the internet in other places, but if you want to reach us, shoot us an email. And also try to catch our live stream that we do usually every other week, usually on Tuesdays. This week we did it on Wednesday, so sorry for throwing you for a loop. Anyway, this has been episode 116 of the Focus Target Podcast. Thanks for being with us. I am your host, Captain Smiley.
This is Shy.
And I'm Van. As always, cover us, Porkins. We're out.
Go Avs. Game 4.